So next speaker, there is this movement of the collaborative economy. Everyone, we know what we're talking about, right? But I recently saw a speech from Jeremiah Owyang, the analyst from Altimeter. He was talking about how collaborative economy is changing, you know, Airbnb and people share stuff. And this is a very, very strong trend and a very strong business. And we have here the founder of SoBi, social bicycles. And I think this is very, very, very interesting for us to learn from. Ryan, the founder of SoBi. Please a huge welcome to Ryan. Again, Ryan. Help me with your surname.
It's a Polish surname, so it's Rzepecki.
Rzepecki.
Of course, I'm American, so we changed it, and it's Rzepecki. But
Rzepecki. Okay, thanks.
Either one works.
Very good. Ryan.
Thanks. So my name is Ryan Rzepecki. I'm the founder and CEO of Social Bicycles. We're a transportation technology company. First, I'd like to say thanks so much for having me here to present. It's really interesting to see the emerging tech scene here in Italy, and to see so many people passionate about making it happen, the public sector, the private sector. Our company is based in New York, and over the last 10 years is building that sort of tech hub as well, and is now regarded as one of the best sort of tech and startup cities, but it wasn't always that way. It took some time. And I think a lot of people in this room are asking, how do you build something like that? And I think it starts with the city itself. Having places that people want to live and work, some place that can attract young talent and provide a high quality of life. And I think Italy is very lucky in that regard, that there's already some really great cities here to build off of. I got here about a week early, and we went down to the Amalfi Coast and saw a bit of southern Italy. And it was just really beautiful. And for me, I have a background in urban planning. And I worked for the New York City Department of Transportation doing bike planning. And so when I travel internationally, I get really excited about boring things like buses and trains, taxis, and bicycles. And being down in the Amalfi Coast, it was interesting to see these cities that were centuries or maybe more than 1,000 years old that were built for pedestrians, for people, and that the car was never even conceived of when these cities were created. And you contrast that to most of the US, which looks something like this, which are very spread out cities, very low density, and ultimately kind of disconnected places where people live in a suburb and they commute into the city. And that's been the pattern of development in the US for about 50 years of building roads and highways. And what it's created was a lot of traffic. Our highways are very full, and the streets in the center cities are given over to cars. And that's been in the trend in the States, and I think maybe to a lesser extent, Europe. But fortunately, that's beginning to change. And over the last few decades, there's been a shift to giving more space to bicyclists and pedestrians. And while I was at the DOT, I got to work on some really interesting projects. Times Square is one of the most iconic intersections and most famous public plazas in the world, and it's where Broadway and 7th Avenue met. And so they shut down traffic on Broadway and created this brand new public plaza that's enjoyed by tens of thousands of people now every day. The same goes for bike infrastructure. This is a lane on 1st Avenue where they removed a parking lane, pushed it out, and put a bike path along the curb. And so you see cities around the world making this type of investment in infrastructure, and it's beginning to pay off. In the US, commuter cycling is up 39% from 2000 to 2010. In the biggest cities, it was up 63%. And in New York, commuter cycling actually doubled between 2007 and 2011. At the same time, these infrastructure investments were being made. But overall, cycling is still a very small part of US trips, 1 or 2%. And from the little time I spent in Italy, it seems like it's also sort of a minority type of transportation here. But at least in the States, 40%, there we go, 40% of trips within the city are less than 2 miles. And so these are trips that could easily be traveled by a bicycle in 10 or 15 minutes. And it's actually the fastest and most convenient way to get around in many of these instances. So why is it that people aren't just jumping on a bike in a city like New York or Rome? And for us, I think part of it is cultural, that a bike is something that is done for sport or recreation. It's not something done, it's something children would do or something that's a leisure activity. Part of it is the infrastructure is still, it's not exactly safe in every place to bike. But a big part is that purchasing, storing, and maintaining a bike in a city can be a pretty significant barrier to entry for somebody that isn't doing it on a daily basis. And that's where the idea of bike share came in. Bike share has been around in some form for a few decades. It's obviously in many European cities. It started in Amsterdam and a few other places where they painted bikes and put them out on the streets for unrestricted public use. And remarkably, it did not work. The bikes were stolen, they were vandalized, and in almost every case, they were thrown into rivers and canals and lakes and discarded. So the history of bike share for the last couple decades is how do you improve upon what is sort of a nice concept. And the first iteration of that was a coin deposit. This was done in a few Scandinavian cities where you'd put in a coin, you'd take a bike, you'd ride it around, and you'd get your coin back. But the industry really didn't begin to take off until the launch of the system in Paris, Velib. It launched with very secure docking stations, walk-up kiosks that allow credit card payments, and a bike that is durable and designed for bike share and designed to be used by many people. And the important thing that they did that not every city has repeated is they launched with significant scale. They launched with 20,000 bikes across the city at 1,200 docking points. It had never been done on this type of scale, and Paris, like Rome and New York, was not really a bike-friendly city at the time, or not much of a bike-friendly city. But the introduction of this system created millions of new cycling trips. It created a new mode of transport that complemented the existing metro and bus system. And so overnight, there's this brand new alternative, but it cost $140 million to install, which is a pretty big price tag for those bikes. But again, if you compare that to a new subway system or a fleet of buses, it was a fair bargain. So you see cities all around the world adopting this, it growing from 25 systems and 15,000 bikes in 2007 to over 500,000 bikes today. There's cities in China that have almost 100,000 bikes in one city. So it's been this explosive growth of this industry. It's been tried in many European cities. In Rome, there's been a few iterations of it, but it never really launched with enough scale to grab on like it did in Paris. So the model that's been existing to date is all really based on 2005 technology, which is you have a rather dumb bike, and then you have this terminal that you park it at. The big problem with that is that it involves a huge investment in infrastructure, which costs a lot of money, between $5,000 and $7,000 per bike to install this infrastructure, all these docking points, and the automated kiosks. So what I've been working on since 2008 is inverting that model, and instead of having a smart rack, you put the brain on the bike. So each bike has its own locking system. Each bike has its own 3G connection, its own GPS tracking system. And then users can find and book those bikes through the web, through the mobile phone, or from the keypad on the bike itself. So the way this works for the user is that you find a bike through the web or the mobile, you select it, you book it, and that transmits your PIN code down to the keypad. You enter your 4-digit PIN code, the bike is released. You can then ride around the city. When you're done, you lock it up, it ends the transaction, and then you can see your statistics, your CO2 reduced, your calories burned, your dollars saved versus driving. You can see your map, and you can share that on the Social Bicycle site, on Facebook, and on Twitter. So we're able to offer all these more advanced features, and we're able to do so at a fraction of the cost. So we can offer a complete bike share system for around $1,000 per bike. So it's a really disruptive price point for what is a more advanced technology, and takes advantage of the fact that most people carry around smartphones in their pocket, and the cost of providing connectivity for a fleet of bikes has plummeted over the last 5 years. And so we've launched 4 projects this year. We have bikes at the San Francisco airport. That's a private fleet for employees. We have bikes in a resort town of Sun Valley, Idaho. We have bikes in Buffalo, New York. We're working with a car share company there. And we have bikes in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is right across the river from New York. And we launched at the same time that New York launched its bike share system, City Bike. So we benefit from like all that exposure of doing a project in the same backyard. The other key benefit of what we're doing is all the data that we can collect from all these trips. This is a heat map over 10 days of our bikes moving through the streets of Hoboken. And this data is useful for cities in that it helps them plan where to put bike lanes and where to put bike racks. It's useful for operators so that they can know how to manage their fleet. And it's useful for the end user in that they have the ability to track their trips and to share those out. And so we think a lot about the future of bike share and really about the future of transportation in general. You know, of course, we want to kind of become the dominant factor in bike share space and have our technology used in cities worldwide. But at its core, bikes are just one part of a solution. And there's all these interesting ideas for what the future of transportation looks like, whether it's personal vehicles or Elon Musk's Hyperloop, which is a vacuum tube that shoots you across the country, or maybe eventually we'll get to the flying car. But we don't have to wait 20 or 30 years to witness a dramatic change in transportation technology. It's actually happening right now with more money flowing into the transportation space really than ever before, particularly to car-sharing companies, to ride-sharing companies, and to fleet companies, or sorry, taxi booking companies like Halo and Uber. And so you're seeing money pour into the space, and you're beginning to see some consolidation in the space, a few acquisitions, companies being combined, and strategic alliances forming. And so where I think we're heading is the idea that you can have all your transportation choices locally available to you through one device. So you just say where you are and where you want to go. You see your spectrum of choices, and you can book and pay for all those on one platform. And we're thinking about ways that we can use our technology to be a company that offers such a solution. We're also looking at all the companies that are consolidating and the big companies that are trying to do the same thing too. So whether it's us, whether it's a big company, or whether it's the consolidation that happens over the next 5 years, I really think the future is going to involve multimodal transportation and having that smartphone be that point of interaction. And so that's sort of the near-term future of transportation. But if you go just a little bit further out, where it gets really interesting is fully autonomous vehicles. And when you say that, when you say self-driving cars, a lot of people think that's like 20, 30 years out in the future, that you're crazy. But Google's had these cars on the streets driving thousands of kilometers for the last several years. And in fact, the only time it got in an accident was when it let the person take over and drive the car. So they're logging the miles. The technology will be there very shortly. Sort of the only barrier is the cultural barrier to say that people are comfortable looking at a car driving down the street without anybody in it. And also the cultural barrier, you know, there's a lot of taxi drivers upset about Uber and these transportation services. Can you imagine how upset they'll be if in the future there's just not people driving taxis and those jobs are eliminated? So you have these sort of cultural barriers that are gonna have to be overcome. But over the next 15 to 20 years, a fully self-driving car just changes everything. It changes what a bus system looks like, it changes what a subway system looks like, and it changes what taxis look like. And in that future, where are bikes? Is there going to be bikes if there's, you know, completely dispatched automated cars? And I think the answer is yes, because for those short trips, it's still going to be a fast way to go. It's an enjoyable way to travel, and the bike fleets can be deployed at a much lower cost. It's a lot easier to deploy 10,000 bikes than 10,000 self-driving cars. So I think even a future of self-driving cars, there will be a role for the bicycle in that future. So for those people in the audience today that are thinking about starting a startup, I guess I would say that you should start with a passion. For me, that passion has been my love of cities and transportation. Then, you know, think about a problem in that space that really bothers you. And you have to want to wake up and try to solve that problem every day. And then finally find other people that also care strongly about that problem and want to build that out with you. And I think that's sort of the most important thing, and I think that's the story of every successful or most successful companies. And it doesn't matter what government incentives are out there. It doesn't matter, you know, what incubator space exists. It comes down to finding a problem that you're passionate about and working a very long time to solve that problem. So I guess I would say for the folks in the audience that are thinking of starting a company, that would be my advice. Start with a passion, and then find the team to help build it. Yeah, I guess I was going to open it up to a few questions for the end of the talk. Q&A?
Sorry, guys. I fell asleep. I'm joking. I was talking because it's coming the startup pitch at the end of the afternoon. So over there, all the startups preparing the pitch, and they're very excited.
Cool.
So, any kind of question for Ryan? Is anyone using like car sharing? Do you use car sharing? Good. All right. Do you use in London? There are the Boris bike, so-called. Very interesting. Is any kind of is bike sharing also in Rome?
Yeah. Has anybody actually used the bike share system in Rome? I guess the question.
Or they stole all the bikes.
Yeah, they're not out now.
That's the problem. Okay. And but in Milan there is the bike. It's called Bike Me. Someone is in there. How is the experience over there? Just to understand. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so in Milan there's certainly Bike Me. In Milan there's also already, I believe, 3 car sharing services. One is from ATM.
Guidami.
Yeah, one is from Ferrovie Nord, and now there's Mercedes pushing Car2Go with their smart cards. And so one of the questions I'm wondering, you see the future where obviously in this business scale is everything. Because if you have scale, you find the car or the bike faster. So it seems that the bigger company it's a little like a winner take all. Is this the way you see it? So city by city will be won by somebody, or you think one day there will be interoperability? So
yeah, there's sort of two models, and I think both are being pursued. One is like one company being that one-stop shop transportation provider, and saying I'm going to provide the bikes, I'm going to provide the cars, and I'm going to do that as one fully controlled service. And the other model is more of a marketplace model, like Amazon Marketplace, where all these companies are listing their services, and then there's more of like a broker that's dispatching that. So I think both models are valid. In the end, I kind of like the marketplace model better because there's so much local expertise in each operation. And that operations doesn't necessarily scale well. It doesn't scale as well as the technology piece. So I think that the marketplace might work, and that there'll be many different transportation operators from market to market, but they're all brought through some sort of collective system.
Show me your hand, and I'm coming to you over there. Right. So you just use it for. Also, I recently read from Richard Branson. He just said, well, what we see is that people doesn't want to buy anymore; they want to share. So I will go in this sharing economy if this is what the customers want.
So there's the trend toward access over ownership. There's also the fact that young people would rather be on their mobile phone texting or tweeting than driving a car. And so you see in the first time in the United States, actual driver's license each year going down. And so automakers are looking at this like, wow, people don't want to drive anymore. And so it's moving to more transportation as a service than saying I want to own the car or perhaps even own the bicycle. Even though a bike is a relatively cheaper asset, there's owning it, maintaining it, worry about it getting stolen, locking it properly. You ride to work in the morning, it rains and you don't want to ride home. There's all these small inconveniences that come with owning a bike.
Yeah. By the way, I don't have a car for 10 years now. I only use car sharing. I'm so happy about that, by the way. So, and with bikes, I mean, could be very similar, Then you have people who want the ownership of their bikes and they will always have it. But you see a future where people will just share bikes or what kind of percentage of people you think they will have their bike, and what kind of percentage of people they will share?
Well, so I live in New York, and they rolled out the bike share there now. I, of course, own my bike, own many bikes. I have a bike company. But I still have a bike share membership, and there's times where it's useful to me. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think that even if you own a bike, you may still find some trips where it's nice to have that in your wallet.
Right.
Just like I own a bike, but sometimes I take the subway, or sometimes I rent a car. So I think that even if bike ownership goes up, which I hope it does, there's still a place for bike share. And I think where bike share really takes off is as it relates to other modes of transportation. So if you do it in Paris, where there's so many bikes and also a really good tube system and buses, it's that whole spectrum.
So I lost a bit about Italy and SoBi. Are you planning to launch in Italy? Will you never launch in Italy?
No,
what's the situation?
I'd really like to. I mean, we've done 4 projects in the States. We get a lot of international inquiries. I've been to Greece. We've talked to folks in Australia. Italy, I think there'd be some really good and interesting markets. I think Rome could actually work. You have some hills here, and there's not that many cyclists on the streets now. But the one reason why it didn't work thus far is there were only a few stations and they were in tourist areas. It was not really a comprehensive bike share system. So we would absolutely want to work in Italy, and we don't have anything in the next 3 to 6 months, but in the long term we'd want to do business here for sure.
All right. Ryan from SoBi, thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you so much. Very good.